Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mars Hour Jupiter Day, and this episode is actually inspired by Adam Ellenbass looking into the upcoming Jupiter opposition of Pluto from Leo. And he did a lovely research talking about the Korean Revolution or the Korean War, the power of vacuum that accumulated at previous oppositions of Pluto and Jupiter, and on the same axis back then Pluto was in Leo. But this is um, giving me an idea because I've been looking at the outer planet cycles with one another, Saturn with the outer planets, and now it's time to go into Jupiter. So Jupiter synodic cycles last 12 years. They're shorter than Saturn, they're shorter than the outer planets, but they're also not annual. They also show us at a decade by decade type of configurations that are worth looking at. And if Adam Ellenbass took Jupiter Pluto, I am taking Jupiter Neptune, which would also expose the Jupiter synodic cycle with Uranus. We had the Jupiter Uranus in Taurus, and Jupiter at the end of Cancer, beginning of Leo, will basically sextile Uranus. It's a shorter cycle, but also an impressive cycle. For example, already right now discussions about cars with wings, what type of license is needed for flying cars can be an issue. It can be growth and refinement of innovations that began with the Jupiter Uranus. I know that particular looking at shoes, toe spreaders, it was the big I can't spread my toes in those sneakers. Later Adidas came up with something that looked like a Birkenstock shoe. So Jupiter rules feet. Venus sign rules design, so the clothing for the feet is shoes. And Uranus rules revolution, innovation. Um, Back then, Saturn was still applying to sextile Uranus, so the structure, but from Pisces, so the structure of the bones of the feet being revolutionized by new shoe designs. That could have been the beginning of the Jupiter Uranus. And Jupiter is basically sextile Neptune from the end of Gemini, square Neptune from the end of Gemini, beginning of Cancer. And now it's moving more towards the trine, which means we are going from conflicting relations between growth and expansion. If I think about the Jupiter square Neptune, for me that would be attempts to limit my growth. Whereas the Jupiter sextile Neptune, which would be from end of Taurus, beginning of Gemini, was when the fruits were so big, and I began to dig up half moons. I think about then. So the Jupiter square was attempting to limit my growth, and kind of like dissolve expansion. And it could even have been a perceived view of overextending or overexpanding that was dissolved, only to find out that to begin with, I was not seeking I was not coming with imperial aspirations, but it was also Jupiter rules trees, and if I think about that time where I was looking into reforestation, um, particularly around Jupiter sextiling Pluto, I think it's when I began to dig up half moons, and then I would be running into the information that ritual abuse took place in forests, and that would be forcing me to face a reckoning of a reality check to reforestation that could have dissolved certain efforts. But actually, in my half moons, I transmuted ritual abuse and trafficking agendas, which was beginning of an onset that perhaps could grow to the Jupiter trine. Like Jupiter trine is coming up. Jupiter is already 15 degrees Cancer. It would trine Saturn and Neptune from the Hiroshima spot, well, the end of Cancer, beginning of Leo. But then it would also, upon trining Neptune, it would also oppose Pluto. And according to Adam Ellenbach's Jupiter opposition Pluto was the Korea War. The power vacuum after Korea was no longer occupied by Japan, and people had to sovereign up. That was the previous Jupiter-Pluto opposition from the Leo Aquarius axis, and now it's basically the opposite. So Pluto is in Aquarius and Jupiter is in Leo. Now, a little bit of history, if I take it back to, let's say, the beginning of the century. The 29 depression will have Jupiter trining Neptune. Jupiter from Taurus trining Neptune in Virgo. So I don't know what these folks agree about. They perhaps agree to dissolve the trade system. Um, um, but upon the Great Depression, it was also when the mafia was providing food for the people. Probably this would be an over-idealized view of what was happening. But this agreement between Jupiter benevolence in Taurus and Pluto and Neptune in Virgo, which is sign of trade, and Neptune would be here in Regulus. So this is where people could ideate the mafia. Neptune Regulus can be hereditary lineages of mafia. So this is where people could ideate the mafia for providing food during the Great Depression. It could also denote the benevolence of the mafia during the Great Depression through charity, which is both Neptune and Jupiter. Of course, such trines could masquerade other things at other times, but this was a time where if nobody else, then the mafia was feeding the people, and is remembered for that because crops were ruined at that time. But then the question, who was it this including, is also up there, and those questions are usually discussed at the squares and the hard aspects. Jupiter would go from the trine to the square with Neptune by January 12th, and Neptune will already have would be in Leo, would be retrograde. It would already be the next year where Jupiter would sextile Neptune. Like I said, quicker transits. Jupiter changes sign every year, so we get quicker movements, and it's a part of a bigger picture. So around the depression, we would have Jupiter going from the trine to the square. And this is where people could have ideated the mafia for being benevolent with food, and then going against the mafia for, I don't know, burning crops, or trafficking people, particularly children, with this configuration. Then we're going to have the 1930s. In 1936, Jupiter is squaring Neptune. 1936 would be around Nuremberg laws, and this square is from Sagittarius, and this is where we begin to have a limit to the expansion of people based on their religion, because Jupiter is in Sagittarius is based on philosophy and religion. This is where Jewish businesses, Neptune in Virgo, would be beginning to be dissolved. There would be limitations, but this would be seen as dissolution of the growth of Jewish businesses. And Jupiter would go from the square to the trine until 1937. And this would be the 1930s, where Hitler was at his peak, and he wanted to claimed that he wanted to transfer the wealth back to the people from the, let's say, Jewish usury. But this square could have made the move of Adolf Hitler, the financial move of Adolf Hitler, actually falter, because instead of supporting the German economy, he was focusing on dissolving expansion of Jewish businesses, where the usury was with the same traffickers that looted him to do the same move, so that they can traffic, for example, Jewish women, and further loot Germany from its resources, which Israeli survivors of the Holocaust would actually not see. Okay, people in concentration camps did not have documentation. And the people that managed to get something from there, I don't know how, but maybe they were linked to the very extortion cults. Or they escaped through Germany, but to escape through Germany, to Nazi Germany, okay, if my grandfather escaped through the forest in Italy and his brother escaped through Germany, I don't know what was this brother connected with. Because as a Jew, to go through Germany while escaping the ghetto was risqué. Things I don't know about my family. So, 1939, which is beginning of the Second World War, we're gonna have Jupiter at the end of Pisces opposing Virgo Neptune, which we're gonna have something like this in 2030, but Neptune will be in Aries and Jupiter will be in Libra. Now, previous 1926, Jupiter opposed Neptune from the end of Aquarius, and this would be the big ideation of the stock market. Okay, before the Great Depression, the stock market was booming and everybody were beginning to invest in it because the bubble was growing, and nothing like Jupiter, Neptune hard aspects for bubble growing. And then Jupiter and Neptune agreed to dissolve the trade when Neptune ingressed into Virgo. It was basically dissolving trade, which could have resulted in a beginning of a bubble. There would be a Black Friday. I don't remember which of them was. Let's see, when was the Black Friday of the Great Depression? Black Thursday, October 24 to October 29. Let's take a look at that here. Okay, we would have been in the aftermath of the Jupiter square Neptune, and Neptune would be in Leo. So it would probably be the ingress for good of Neptune to Virgo that would cause the Great Depression in October. Um, so and here this is a very risky thing because Jupiter opposing Neptune, people would begin to ideate the stock market, and then they would see they would even see yield, they would even see their investments growing, and then with the Jupiter square Neptune would begin an unfolding that would climax to the Great Depression. So this would be one of the contributing factors. And we see the hard aspects, a point of ideation and evaluation, but the trine between Jupiter and Neptune is the bubble that precedes. Now we're going to have such a bubble that precedes um, this year when Jupiter opposes Pluto, it trines Saturn Neptune. So people might feel that their stocks are yielding, but then their wealth can be confiscated by the state or by any proletariat, getting proletariat. Um, Jupiter conjoined Neptune 1932. 1960, 1916, again a square between Jupiter and Neptune. 1917, and then we're going from the square to the sextile. So the square from Taurus to the sextile in Gemini, um, which would begin the First World War. The Bolshevik Revolution was Jupiter going from the square with Neptune. Neptune was in Cancer, Jupiter was in Aries, and then going from the square in Aries to the sextile in Taurus. Jupiter would be 5 degrees Taurus, and sextiling Neptune in Cancer during the Bolshevik Revolution, where Jupiter would rule land, and the Bolshevik Revolution was somewhat still agrarian. It's not agrarian like China, because it was not a mind over matter in that sense, but it was basically Jupiter Taurus really emphasized also this year, and not this year, it was actually 2 years ago, emphasized the importance of one's own land, or land, growing the fertility of the land, the abundance of the land. And the Bolshevik Revolution here was also agrarian. Okay, it was not like China, it was not mind over matter, but it was also it was not just industrialized. And this can be denoted by this Jupiter and Taurus sextile in Pluto, sextile in Neptune. But again, land, to honor, to have land, this is also why the Bolshevik Revolution failed in yielding what it wanted to bring, which is that utopia of communal ownership of land. Land, the feminine, when the feminine is seen as profane, when the feminine is violated, when the feminine is raped and then disowned as a whore, when they were raped to make by rape what people call sex espionage, then there is no prosperity. Human trafficking does not yield revolution that actually liberates Palestine, but also Israel. For example, with the juristic revolution, or the religious one, which is kind of Ayatollah. 1941, Jupiter trined Neptune. 1942, Jupiter squared Neptune. 1945, end of the war, Jupiter conjoins Neptune in 5 degrees Libra. This would be after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I believe. 1941, Jupiter trines Neptune from Beta Persei. What they agree upon is dead camps. So Jupiter would be co-present. We can look at this chart, 1941. Jupiter would be co-present with Uranus, Mars, and Saturn, I believe. Yes, we had the stellium in Taurus, Jupiter, Uranus, Venus, Saturn, Sun, Mercury. Where's Mars? Oh, Mars would be in Denebalgadi. This would be the Arbeit macht frei. Okay, Arbeit macht nicht frei. Okay, the people that says, why don't people want to work, would be ushered to the Arbeit macht frei. Sex work is work, would be ushered to the Arbeit macht frei. Okay, people that say sex work is work would be ushered to the Arbeit macht frei. People that said the Me Too went too far. Well, in the ghetto, nobody was wearing anything that could be judged. People that prevented people from cleaning themselves because of ritual abuse and astral attacks or use of technology interface and dark occult, they would have been ushered to the showers. And unfortunately, that happened together with people that had nothing to do with that. They were simply the victims of the things, or could not have known that the trains are not going to take them someplace nicer. Neptune was with Rahu, surrounding, besieging the planet of besiegement Al-Qaid, and indeed they were ushered to cities where they would be killed by work. Mars around Denebalgadi here, squaring this sextile. This could also be the suffragists in the death camps. Um, the people that try to siphon people's energy, to create death camps in order to loot, basically to the human traffickers. Yes, there would be some of them in the ghettos of the lodges. Um, and those that not, to basically to persecute them, people would need to abolish trafficking altogether. Basically, the people that allowed the trafficking, that disowned their children because they were raped, entered the concentration camps. The people that sacrificed, because Neptune is also sacrificed, members of their communities to, I don't know, to run a business, to this, to that, basically were dying in the labor camps, in the concentration camps. They were willing to sacrifice someone to have a competitive job at a certain field, and then that Arbeit macht frei, and nothing could save them. They could be Rothschilds, they could be but those that would be let's say the traffickers, they could only be beaten by people who would abolish trafficking and the esoteric part of trafficking, including denouncing slavery, even in religion, even in Judaism. The people that targeted Jews but were okay with slavery and rape were meeting the Jews at the concentration camps. And this includes the German people. The German people who were okay with women going back to the kitchen so that they can have a job. They would find out that everybody Jews. And if everybody Jews, then everybody in concentration and death camps. It was a form of depopulation. Moving forward, you have the 1950s. Jupiter squares Neptune 1954 and already sextiles in 1956 and 55. Conjunction 1958. Those would be the times of the Cold War. If you're interested around Cuba Missile Crisis, that would be still within the trine, which would result in the opposition. The operation that failed prior to that would be the sextile and the square. Assassination of JFK was also Jupiter trine. Jupiter in Pisces trining Neptune in Scorpio. Mid-60s, Jupiter opposes Neptune from Taurus. And then the 67, the Israel Pyrrhus win, the 67 borders. So 67, Jupiter went from the trine to the square with Neptune. Why is that the Pyrrhus win? Because people were expecting to no longer go to the army, and then that would build the 1973 war. 1973, Jupiter is basically going from the conjunction, but Jupiter is in the sextile with Neptune. Neptune is in Sagittarius, dissolving expansion. Jupiter in Aquarius, and this would terminate the grand optimism of the after 67 war, and this would also be the oil embargo. This is where people would be able, after 1973, to Israel both had to endure the Yom Kippur War, which was kind of like a 7th October, but without the weird aftermath. And basically, after that, it would be possible to criticize Israel in international peer reviews, and it would be expected to criticize Israel in international peer reviews because Iran gave it oil. So like I said, something that founds itself on trafficking people, trafficking women, doesn't yield sovereignty. But yet, because of the position of Israel, to beat Israel, people would actually have to abolish trafficking. And when people are busy calling excruciating torture to loss of sense of self and mind-controlled sex work, and side by side with saying that the Me Too went too far, they are on the highway to creating their own genocide. And they won't be able to blame anyone. I don't say won't be able to blame Israel, because Israel is also doing that. 79 Jupiter trines Neptune. 80 Jupiter squares Neptune. 1984 Jupiter conjoins Neptune. This would be agreement around radiation, I think. And there would be some radiation leak that goes off the radar. Neptune in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, degree 1, January. So it's big radiation leak. (1987) Jupiter squares Neptune. (1989) the Soviet Union fall, Jupiter opposes Neptune. A big dissolution, and Neptune is in Capricorn, Jupiter is in Cancer. And so we have a big dissolution into growth of nationalism. Mundanely, Jupiter in Cancer is growth of nationalism, which we also see with this Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, European countries halt in Article 5 is the strength of the national unit, and they do that because of the demonstrations of people against mandatory recruitment. And in this we see the power of the national unit even in a military alliance. Whereas if this would be the opposite, we would expect Article 5 to be enforcing the countries with rigorous power, and the people or the separate nations not having much say. But this time, this wasn't the case, and even though United States did full-blown Article 5 in Iran, in Iraq, some might even say that the United States, never mind. But in 1989, this big opposition of Jupiter and Neptune basically denotes at a big dissolution. So 1992 would already have the trine. Again, 1914 we see the opposition. 1926-27 we see the opposition. And 1939, which be the beginning of the Second World War. But the beginning of the Second World War would be basically a big dissolution of trade and the growth of maritime, global maritime kind of like what we see today. When Jupiter is going to ingress into Leo and begin to trine Neptune. Right now it's exiting the square with Neptune. (1997) the Neptune, upon the Neptune ingress to Aquarius, Jupiter is going from the conjunction to the sextile. This would be the booming of the internet. So Jupiter and Neptune conjunction, wave-based technology. But here it would be with the sextile, the internet. 1999 and 2000, bug 2000, Jupiter in Taurus squares Neptune in Aquarius. Big fuss over nothing. So people were ideating the doom and finding out that it's nothing much when it came to bug 2000 or the big fears of the doom or the end of the world with the internet, and actually nothing much happened. Jupiter was only materializing the internet even more. And that we see with Jupiter in Gemini, trining Neptune in Aquarius. Internet is basically interneting. We're after 2000, not really bug 2000. 2002 and 3 we're going to have another opposition, which would be I think it was Second Lebanese War and another weird argument with Iraq. Then we go towards the trine. 2006, Jupiter from Scorpio squares Neptune. This was prior to the subprime crisis. This was basically when I left a workplace that was asking me to do a credit fraud, and I refused to do a credit fraud. Jupiter here is in sign of Scorpio. Neptune in Aquarius can be fraud. Well, other people were having credit ideation, and this was also regarding the monthly payments. So it is installments. It's basically about not creating artificial installments. And I was playing the role of Neptune. I was dissolving the expansion of that credit fraud. We had multi-card by Leomi card in the years 2005-2006. You might be eligible to class lawsuit, particularly if you thought that you're going to pay this sum and eventually end up paying that sum. You're probably eligible to the compounding interest. And advice I got from lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, is to have it separate litigations and not one class litigation. Back then I was in my 20s. I wasn't much aware, but to me it was like, why to tell somebody something that is irrational when and do it in a way where they are already closing the deal so that they don't actually hear what I say, which I know will lead to the same issues that I solved with previous times that this was done to people. 2007. By the way, I did not know about class lawsuits then, because then I would offer, instead of selling products, I would just say, your current card, yeah, you can have a card that renews and you can pay that loan, but also, if you never chose this card to begin with, what about the class lawsuit? And this, of course, would be recorded calls, which could ensue litigation against me, in which I would inevitably win and make a lot of money. But I did not know about class lawsuits back then. And by the way, if you're thinking what kind of a credit card call center person would tell people, hey, you can litigate our company, because if you actually didn't know that your monthly payment is going to be such and you thought it's just a credit card. I'm the one. It's me. Hi. I'm the problem. I'm fifthly drawn to human trafficking, base military. Somebody delineate the chart. Okay. Planet of divination and planet of doing it ourselves, which is Aries. Let's see what was the delineation for that statement. Sol hour. Sol in the basically position of the full moon, sign of real estate in the 11th house. Mars in my first house. Number 5 is number of Mars. Fifthly John. Why fifthly John? I mean, I know for Jupiter exalted in Cancer in the 2nd house. Moon in Libra. The odd scale evens. Venus from the 12th house squares Pluto. I don't know. Midheaven ruled by Saturn, royal army, but if based on human trafficking, dissolves. um, it's definitely an Aries statement because it was an I am. um, uh, so imagine me breaking down truths to people working at the credit card company. 2000 Seife, Jupiter in Sag, sextiles Neptune in Aquarius. That was the kidnapping of Madeleine. 2009, the aftermath of the subprime Jupiter conjoins Neptune at basically around Dene-Balgedi. Now, here's the thing. The subprime was not felt in Israel until a year or two later. That would be when the subprime would be felt in Israel. Jupiter, oh, by the way, also rules studies and philosophy. And then about is wealth redistribution. This would be the time where I would begin the crisis, following which I would receive funding for a degree. Due to going through a mental crisis, and mental health is Neptune. And happened in the house of 12th house for me, which is house of mental health. So the dissolution of my mental health led to funding for a degree. Eventually, then Jupiter would sextile Neptune, would square in 2012, where I would begin to study. 2013 would be the trine, would be my actual studies. So 2015, Jupiter opposes Neptune. Jupiter in Virgo opposes Neptune in Pisces. And this is September. I think this is when I left the workplace with a person that tried to join me to a trafficking ring. I was already in my 30s, so I cannot say, oh, he tried to traffic me, because I would be alter sack for the trafficking rings, that probably wanted me to be a Ghislaine Maxwell. In any case, was not my type of endeavors. 2017, we begin to see the Me Too with Jupiter from Scorpio trining Neptune. That would be the Me Too era. And then 2019, which is the spark of COVID, Jupiter in Sagittarius squares Neptune in Pisces. And this would be the limitation of holistic healers, but also the limitation of intellectuals, particularly in the medical field, which I was doing a research in, and I suffered tremendously at this time. It was also dissolution of our help to get actual accurate medical treatment, even in a holistic perspective. Jupiter would sextile Neptune from Capricorn in 2020s. 2022 we have Jupiter conjunction with Neptune from end of Pisces, April 2022. I honestly don't remember. It was around my ascendant, but I don't remember my life then. Neptune is also the Neptune is forgetting. Falcon, I don't remember. I was in Netherlands. Then I came back Faber, and that it was Ukraine war. And then April, I think, when I found housing, and I had dissociation from that. Um, yeah. Um, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. You didn't wake up from what I woke up from. This is my coping mechanism. Jupiter ends of Taurus, 6,000 Neptune in Pisces. It's 2024. So basically, October 7th, we don't see any particular aspect between Jupiter and Neptune. And this tells me that the 7th of October cycle in terms of Jupiter and Neptune started in 2022. And indeed, they tried to traffic me to this Nochba party, to this Nova party. They wanted to take another lady that is astrologer, not lady, person who was gender non-conforming, that is astrologer, and is actually trafficked. There's no such thing as sex work, so they're actually trafficked. But then I said something for about the fact, because they were studying medicine and they were stripper, and then I said, well, people forget that people cannot, that people don't actually have a choice, would not to work in, let's say, stripper or something like that. And then they didn't talk to me anymore. They really liked me before that, but there were attempts to try to make meetings so that so that they would come to Israel to the Nova, and I was not going to the Nova. I was not going to invite people, which tells me that some people in United States knew about the upcoming plans for the Nova. Um, and they were person that were interviewing in the astrology podcast, and this is how I knew them. I know for sure that it was not them trying to traffic me, because um, there wouldn't be a reason that there would be, when I was doing channeling experiment, that there would be attempts to urge me to communicate with them or to invite them to go, so that later we would be in Nova. It was probably somebody of their community, either when they were as a stripper, or when they were as astrologer, or when they were as um, I think they studied pharmaceutical science. So one of those professions probably wanted to sacrifice them, and there was attempt also to sacrifice me. But it tells me that 2022 opened the cycle in respect for the Jupiter Neptune, and this would be around a belief, but also divination, astrology, channeling, even attempt to use my channeling experiment to try to traffic me, or to try to even make me traffic people, which I didn't do, fortunately. Um, yeah, 2020 Jupiter in 18 degrees, toxic degree, sextile in Neptune, 18 degree. I think this was around beginning of a channeling experiment. So this would be something very evil that was trying to get through channeling to people. May 24, Jupiter sextiles Neptune. June 2025, Jupiter squares Neptune from 2 degrees Cancer. Again, more traffic in attempts. Neptune is sign of real estate already. And July 2026, we will have Jupiter from 4 degrees Leo, trining Neptune 4 degrees Aries. And at the same time, Jupiter, I think, will be opposing Pluto. Let's take a look at the chart. Jupiter opposing Pluto. Yes, at the time where it trines Neptune. And it also sextiles Uranus. So definitely this supports prediction of revolution or sudden revolution, or revolution as remediation of that tension. And this revolution will have a technological, trade, and even astrological. But this revolution is from the term in Gemini Decan first that does not concern itself with truth. Mm. Um, Mercury will be retrograde in Cancer at that time. Moon will, of course, opposition to Saturn upon the exact ingress. Again, we may see philosophical conflicts, religious conflicts. They can be, Jupiter is choice, and in sign of Leo, there can be an emphasis on the visible choice, but the invisible circumstances might not allow what seems to be like visible choice. So this can be scientific gaslighting regarding choice of leaders. With the Sun here around Procyon applying to oppose Pluto as well. I don't know. It can be that we think a certain leader had a choice, but they actually didn't. It looks like they had a choice, but they actually didn't. And the invisible, esoteric, occultistic, or technological limitation to their choice could be still invisible. It can be a leader that is extorted to do something, or to do a revolution, or to do a war even. Mars in Gemini, Mercury in Cancer retrograde. Attempt to trade nation, that can be a false flag as well. So what do I figure from the Jupiter cycles, Jupiter synodic cycles? First of all, they're way shorter. It's not going to give me these big events that outer planet cycles give. Or even that Saturn to outer planets, that is like a 28-year cycle. They're very repetitive and they require additional info to kind of really characterize. And yet, Jupiter opposing Neptune is a big dissolution of something. Jupiter squaring Neptune is a big ideation followed by devaluation. Um, those are involving the respective signs. So it can be trade, it can be real estate, it can be trafficking, and even use of channeling to traffic people, as we saw in the beginning of the 2020s. Um, Also, people that live in countries that have like MK often a call to declassify classified project, I think is way more like effective and transparent. Um, and also there shouldn't have been a reason that somebody. This is a little bit of an energy reading. There shouldn't have been a reason that somebody would have thought that somebody that was new to the field or that was a newcomer to or a new player in the field of divination or holistic healing or something like that, there wasn't a reason to suspect that they are malicious, because the people that were gathering up against them were gathering together as the professions that prevented them from healing and recovery.